What's up, Tavis? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir.
Got a closing this morning. We're on a little bit of a timeline. Got a closing, doing business.
Trying to, get more inventory.
Yeah,
So this is an acquisition closing. So the
nice.
next best thing to an acquisition closing is a sale closing.
Yes. Well, in a few months. So, what is this one? You're flipping this one. Your plan is
Yes, it
to.
is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's the? Is it similar to the one you're doing there in Carrollton? Is it a smaller one, or is this kind of going to be a bigger project?
So this is still what I'd consider a tier one, although it's got more elements to it. So the cost is close to 100,000.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, almost 20,000 of it is the plumbing.
Hmm.
So it goes back to that wonderful thing that we love to discuss when it comes to cast iron pipes.
Yeah. What year is the
So
house?
this is in Garland. It's Richardson ISD though.
Hmm.
So it's right on the edge. The benefit of this house, which Garland is kind of one of those things. If you're in like Garland proper, what you run into is the monopoly of Garland utilities.
Hmm.
So that can be kind of a strain on certain tenants because what happens is you're in a district where it's Garland city water and city uh, sewer, um, but then you have to also pay for the electric, which is Garland Power and Light.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of a monopoly. You get one big bill. So my sister-in-law that lives in a house in Garland, um, her bills are quite high. Now,
How
mind
did
you,
Garland
she
finagle
has
that? Because I thought electricity was deregulated, and that's why we have so many different companies
I
and all that
think it
stuff.
was established years ago,
Hmm.
and it's all part of their grid. So it's not an Encore grid; it's actually a Garland Power and Light
Oh,
grid.
okay. Hmm.
So if you're on Encore Power, for instance, my strip center is technically outside of the district, even though I swear, like Caddy Corner from the property is a Garland Power and Light little hub. So I don't know how that happened,
Yeah.
but fortunately, with my building, it is not part of Garland Power and Light hub.
Yeah.
It's part of Encore. So I was able to shop, uh, you know, different providers
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of
for
the nice
that.
things about Texas is you can shop. And then a couple people got, not a couple, a lot of people got in trouble 4 years ago or something when we had a really hot summer. And I remember hearing the ads for this company on the ticket, the local sports station I listened to, and they were all over the place. But there was a business model for a little while where they were, it was sort of the base rate that was sort of the wholesale rate plus a little bit, and
Hmm.
sounded really cool, and it was cheap and all that. Hey, we're basically passing on the savings to you. We're just marking this up a little bit. Well, then all of a sudden, I think part of the grid went down, and there were some rolling blackouts, and the base rate went insane. And a lot of these people ended up with thousands of dollars worth of electricity bills because it was
Hmm.
tied to the base rate. Whereas if you're tied into a contract, they're buffering that price for a long time, and then if the price goes over that, they eat it for a while, and it kind of levels out over time. But yeah, that was sort of a lesson learned there is make sure you get a fixed rate that's not tied
Yeah.
to the grid going down and all the power, rolling blackouts where power is super, super expensive for a while. So,
So
um,
I use a company. I was turned on to this years ago when I was building the energy efficient homes, and one of my one of the purchasers, told me that his electric bill was like $35 or $50 a month or something like that, right? One of these new builds that we built, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And then he was like, "Yeah, I use this service called Energy Ogre."
hmm,
And Energy Ogre, you pay $10 a month for, for them to basically shop the contracts for you, and they'll find you the best rate based
hmm,
on how you want to structure it. If you say, "Hey, I want renewable energy," or "I want solar power," or "I want," I'm okay with green energy kind of stuff. Anyways, they'll do the shopping for you. So I put our personal home on it probably 6 years ago,
yeah,
and then now like all of our midterm rentals,
Okay.
because we pay for the utilities. I have them all on this account as well,
I may need to
and
look at that.
it works pretty good. So and then it's
Yeah.
kind of cool because they'll find you the best rate. Like the original initial rate is pretty good, right? It's like an introductory like 6 month contract, and that's like a really low rate,
Hmm.
and then that'll adjust, and then you'll go to like a 1 year contract, and then when
Okay.
that 1 year's up, you'll start getting notifications both from the servicer but also from Energy Ogre saying, "Don't worry, we got it under control. We're finding the best rate."
Okay. It's a
And
year to
then
year deal.
yeah. And
Okay.
then so but they handle basically renewing that contract, and then you just keep your auto debits on file, and
Yeah.
it works out really well.
Well,
So, I mean,
considering my kids' affinity, evidently, that I found out yesterday, I got my electricity bill, and this is one of the cooler times of the year. It's been nice out. I get
mhm.
my electricity bill. It's over $300 this month.
Oh man.
And I go upstairs and I check their thermostat that's in my son's room, and they've got it set on hold at 65 degrees. And so they've just been running it all day and night for at 65 for who knows how long. I said, do not for any reason touch this thing. I set it on the program, and so we're good to go. But I think having someone else helping me out with the rate would be very nice, because if it's that high now, by the time we get into summer, when they're talking about it being over the top hot this summer, I think it would be sort of prohibitively expensive. So,
Yeah.
well, cool. I'm glad you got another project coming up. I know you're doing well there with your small flip. Y'all rocking and rolling. That'll probably be going on the market pretty soon, and
Yeah,
then you can get this other one.
the goal is to get that one up on the end of the month here.
Yeah,
So be
well, I need
in
to
and
come
out
by
in
and
30
take a
days. I mean,
video.
and that was, we talked about it before, but that's kind of a borderline lipstick
Yeah,
renovation, right? It's still tier one, and there's still things that come up. I mean, again, you can't unknow what you know. So like just having my vendors go over there, my AC guy goes over there, and system's okay, differentials are okay, but he gets in the attic. He's like, man, this ductwork's just falling apart. He's
mm,
like, it's just old. It's that old Mylon stuff, and he's like, it's disintegrating. You need to replace it.
yeah,
So, that's something that some of our competition probably would not mess with, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. I mean, it's busted my AC budget a little bit from what I had allotted, but it's one of those things. Just go ahead and do it, showing good faith, and it's another thing I can kind of mark on the report that I did. So it's like
yeah,
I'm keeping the existing floors, but I changed out the panel, upgraded the panel, moved it to the outside. That's a safety concern that's going to come up on
yeah.
inspections.
You're doing the
You
right
know,
things,
yeah, and then you got some AC ducts that need to be replaced. Okay, we're going to put brand new AC ducts in there.
right?
You know,
As
um,
opposed to another person who might have come in and spent the same money replacing the granite, or maybe the floors a little bit, making it look decent when you walk in, but then the infrastructure is not there. And then most likely they're going to get beat up on the inspection, and they're going
right.
to have to come off on some of that anyway. So, yeah, and then inspectors don't look at cosmetic stuff. They don't come in and say, hey, that granite looks a little old, or that flooring, looks a little,
Right.
they might, I guess maybe say something if it's a safety issue, but on the flooring or something. But they don't point out cosmetic stuff. So I think that's really smart. Well, I went to a listing appointment yesterday out in Keller, and it's cool to go to a different part of town because I spend a lot of my time over here. Obviously, Carrollton, Plano, Frisco, the Colony, Little Elm, Richardson, Garland. Like this is kind of my part of town. So going over to Keller and going through Colleyville, man, there's some like really beautiful neighborhoods over there. I've spent some time over there, but the way I was driving yesterday, it kind of seemed to take me a back way. It was gorgeous. I mean, some of these houses are just enormous on 5 or 10 acres and just amazing houses. So it's always nice to sort of get out of your bubble and see what's out there. So I have a coworker that used to work in my office, works at a different office now. Her parents are getting a little bit older. They're wanting to downsize. Well, I knew that they lived on some acreage. So this is in the middle of Keller. They live on 5 acres. They have one of their neighbors wants an acre of that that's already sort of parceled out with some fencing. So that seems like that might be decently easy. We're getting title work done. We're going to get a survey done so we know exactly what he wants. But the rest of the 4 acres, it's going to be really interesting. they've been there 50 years. So,
Wow.
this is Keller. I mean, there's all sorts of new building going on, and there's a mansion at the end of their street that has a 9-hole golf course, a private 9-hole golf course.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this house has to be 7,000 square feet. New, I mean,
Wow.
beautiful. Well, it's on the same street as them. But then there's also a lot of these sort of original folks that have been out there 50 years, 40 years, and their property's overgrown. It's got a lot of dead trees on it. I mean, they've got a couple, I don't know, kind of not cedars, but pine tree type trees. I mean, I'm talking right next to the house that have grown up huge. And about 6 or 7 years ago, they had the whole outside of the house redone, the whole exterior, new stucco, new AC, new roof. But then the inside's super dated, and they've got a lot of stuff, kind of cluttered. He's got a barn, and you would love this. This is why I want to take you out there. You would love this. This guy's a car guy. He was a physician in the Air Force, kind of like Aaron. But he's a car guy, and he's got a barn with, I think it's a 48 Chevy, 49
Nice.
Chevy. He's got a 49 Packard. He's got a 65 Ford Galaxy. And then he's got about 4 or 5 old school Mercedes that he's working on.
Nice.
And they're just all piled up in the driveway and in the barn, and they're covered up, and there's just cool old signs. And this guy's just really interesting. He's got all sorts of farm equipment laying around. But I mean, it's one of those things where you have the conversation, okay, what's the most important thing to you? Do you need to get top dollar out of this? I know this is the last thing y'all are ever going to sell. Do you need this to go quickly? Do you need it to be easy? Like, what's the most important thing to you? And they really couldn't answer it, but I reading between the lines, it was sort of a combination. It's a little sad. He's an Air Force guy, physician, but he's honest with me. He said, man, inflation's killing me. I don't have a lot of extra money to just, spruce the place up and do a bunch of landscaping. And because I talked about, well, maybe we need to get Pablo out here, and because a lot of the trees are kind of hanging onto the house and there's bushes everywhere. But I mean, they could work for 2 or 3 months and really try to get the house, but at the end of the day, it's still very dated. So
he's retired. He's on a fixed income.
Fixed income, yeah. And I mean, it's just trying to keep up 5 acres and a house and a barn. It's eating them up. So they're wanting to downsize, go live by one of their daughters that I used to work with over in Bedford or Euless area. And so it's going to be an interesting sale. It's going to take a little bit of time. We got to get a survey done. There's a few interested parties in the neighborhood, friends of friends that want to be in the neighborhood. And it'll just it'll be one of those things where we need to come up with a market price. And I talked to him and I said, I think we'll have to kind of back into this one. We'll have to find the value of the land, because I think a lot of people out there would want to scrape it. The house itself, especially since they spent decent money on the outside, it looks okay. But I just know from a structure on the inside and just the scale of things and how the kitchen is and how small the master bathroom and shower is, like someone's going to either want to completely gut it and redo it, or, maybe use it as a base and add on to it, but maybe scrape it. So I think you're probably looking at land value plus some infrastructure. They've got 2 septic tanks. They've got the barn, so
how many acres?
5. They'll be selling 4 most likely. The next door neighbor wants this 1 acre that's already kind of fenced off. So I think it'll be easy to parcel that out as long as it's doable from the city's perspective, and they don't have to do a bunch of infrastructure. Because at one point, I guess they were telling them they had to do some road work and some drainage work if they were going to sell it. So as long as it's pretty easy, I think they're going to go ahead and do that. But yeah, so I don't know. What are your thoughts? I know super unique properties are harder to do. You don't have just this great comp right down the street that's a similar house on similar acreage with a barn. It's like, well, this is very unique.
This is going to put your comping skills to the test, my friend.
To the test, yes. Well, and it doesn't help that Zillow exists, and a neighborhood over is being developed with brand new 3,500, 4,000 square foot, pretty nice houses. And, then you have others that have sold, and it really distorts the Zestimate, but especially when how far out are they going? What are they looking at? Are they looking at the year? Plus they had their bath and bed off. So it can it sets this benchmark of expectation in your seller's minds, and you have to educate without completely crapping on their house that they've lived in for 50 years, because it is cool. Like the whole property is cool. I think It's super desirable. It's in a nice part of town. There's a ton of development that's going on around it. I think it'll be very desirable, but it's just how do you position it? How do you make it easy for them? I'm going to try to connect them with some estate sale companies. They're open to that, just to try to make that part easy. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a project. It won't be it's not something I'm going to go over next week, take pictures and get on the MLS. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I want to take you over there to see that these cars are pretty awesome. So if for no other reason, I need your 2 cents on comping just to go see the
that'd
cars.
be awesome.
So,
Yeah. Those are tricky. I mean, you've got to look at it multiple ways and multiple angles. And you're right. Zillow is just this, quick evaluation that takes a combination of recent sales along with, what the tax assessed value is, and, creates this quick algorithm and spits out a number. And, especially with assessments going up over the last several years as well, that doesn't help either. Right.
yeah.
I looked at a property, I think I told you offline a little bit, Tavis and I looked at a property that we thought might be a cool opportunity for a wedding venue.
Oh yeah.
And tax assessed value on it was like 1.5. And the homeowner was like, yeah, we want it. We want to sell it for the tax assessed value. And it was, I want to say 10 acres. But it was zoned commercial, which was weird. It was tax assessed commercial. We get out there and there's a bunch of cows and everything. And I'm like, why is there no exemption on here?
Right.
And then it was just this hodgepodge of weekend projects that turned into massive,
I know. Yeah.
massive properties or massive improvements. And that makes it extremely difficult to try to start, breaking it down and doing an appraisal on it.
Right.
The funny thing is, just off the hip and based on what we saw, I was like, it might be somewhere around $1 million, with the improvements now, but it's not operating as a business. There was no cash flow. Like it would take a couple $100,000 to clean this thing up and get it to a point where it could operate as a income producing business.
Yeah.
And then we would still want to look at these exemptions and all these different things. And they had an appraisal done on it, and the appraisal came back, and it was right around $1 million. So,
yeah. And if that property was north, if it was maybe closer to Sherman, it's out in Nevada, which is way east Collin County. I mean, you feel like you're halfway to Louisiana when you're out there. But I'm not saying that progress won't go that way, but it's just not racing that way right now. There's nothing on the other side of Nevada that seems to be really pulling things in. I guess Terrell's somewhere out there, maybe in a roundabout way, but you don't have the draw north like you have Sherman, then you have Lake Texoma, you have Oklahoma and all that stuff.
Yeah, you don't have the thoroughfares, right?
No, you don't have 75.
Growth will always follow transportation.
Yeah.
Right.
So if it was in there, it would be a slam
further
dunk.
You get away from that. Yeah.
Yeah. But Nevada, I had a client, a therapy client out in Nevada at one point, and I thought, my gosh, I am going to run out of gas.
Well, here's the thing you got to think about. Anytime you got to drive around a lake to get anywhere, it always adds a lot more commuting time than what it looks like on the map, right? It's like, oh, it's not far. And then you got to drive around a lake to get somewhere. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, you either drive around or you're going over it. And those bridges over there are notorious for accidents that just back up the bridge. Every time you're listening to the radio, there's some I-30 accident going to Rockwall.
Yeah, I-30's been a mess.
Yeah, it's been a real mess. But they are making some cool improvements out in Rockwall. So we'll have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to talk about Panther Island. I'm not familiar with Panther Island over in Fort Worth. I was reading an article that seems really neat. But we'll get to that.
Yeah,
I've never
heard that before.
Yeah. So let's get it to a little bit of a market update. So the market update, it's similar. We're creeping up 38 days on the market. Overall, the overall MLS is in the 40s where we live ish, 38, 39 days on market, definitely going up. Number of houses on the market is going up. I'm still trying to figure out the difference. The Dallas Morning News had an article that was referencing the real estate research institute over at Texas A&M, and their numbers seemed a lot higher as far as how many houses are on the market compared to last year. They were saying something like 47% more. I'm seeing, more, but more like 14%. So I don't know where the difference is, but the moral of the story is there's a lot more houses on the market now than there were a year ago, and the inventory is close to 3.9 months. This article was saying 6 months is balanced. So to read this article, it actually seemed optimistic. Like, okay, yeah, finally a balanced market. But really, what's driving that is just not a lot of houses are selling, and more inventory is coming online with your new builders, with people who have to sell. Just like my customers, they're wanting to downsize and they're wanting to do their thing, and they don't really care what the market's doing. They
Well,
just need to put it on the market. So
I think inflation, inflation's a real thing. I mean, everybody's feeling it.
yeah,
It's one of those things that just doesn't happen immediately overnight, but it does happen, and people are starting to feel it quite a bit. And
yep.
I'm looking at an opportunity right now to buy a property that's in Aubrey, and um, good friend of mine and avid listener, Casey, has been listening to our show, and he reached out to me, and
What's up, Casey?
unfortunately, Casey Moran. Casey Moran is
What's
his
up,
name.
Casey Moran? Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah. So the thing is, he's dealing with a family, and she lost her job, and they need to sell, and they just bought it a couple years ago, and they weren't in that low interest rate. It's still rather low. I think it's like a five. It's in the fives, maybe the higher fives or something. So it's not,
Mm-hmm.
a super low rate. But just in a position where lost their job, inflation's killing them. They need to sell. They need to reset, regroup. And so we're starting to get some of those conversations and things like that. I mean, just like you're talking about in Keller. I mean, I think the underlying measure is, you know, the amount of cash flow that he has on his fixed income is not enough to support his current lifestyle.
Yep.
And they've got a lot of equity in this property, and probably as much as it kills them to, uh, to sell it, that's the source where they
Exactly.
have the most equity, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's just forcing people to do it, and it just everything's more expensive, groceries and eating out, and man, tips, and it just you can barely go out and do it. Just seems crazy. But just like the ticket was talking the other day, all these concert venues and the sporting events are sold out, and they were talking about the average price of going to certain events and what's the most expensive, and of course the NFL is the most expensive, and what's the
Mm.
most reasonable. And there's a lot of baseball stadiums that you can still go and get a ticket for $17, and so it's it was an interesting conversation. But the average price to go out and for a family of four to go see a lot of sporting events is close to $1,000 by the time you park and pay for tickets and pay for concessions and get decent seats for a lot of events. You're easily $500 to $1,000. And I'm not telling you anything. You've got season tickets, and I know it adds up, and they keep going up on prices. And I'm sure there's those conversations of like, are we still going to use this? Is this still is this still enjoyable? So yeah, it's tough. Jerome, speaking of inflation, Jerome Powell and his friends met this last Tuesday, and the language that they used was a little concerning because we came into 2024 with this optimism of like, oh, okay, great. They cut the rates. We're just kind of waiting for everything to kind of come out in the wash. Then we're gonna where they raised the rates last year, they're gonna cut rates this year. We're gonna try to get back to normal. We're really gonna energize the economy and get things going. Well, early on, well, we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait. Well, then the language this time said we're not going to raise rates anytime soon, but I think we're going to go ahead and hold steady. So not only are they're not talking about cutting rates, but he's sort of alleviating the fear of like, are they going to raise them again? Because inflation is pointing towards the fact that they might need to raise rates again and slow things down because inflation continues to be an issue. So we're not out of the woods by any stretch. And who knows? Everyone thought that the election year would sort of bring about some change and really try to pump the economy to make things easier. And everyone's really happy going to the voting booths and all that. It does not seem to be playing out like that. And the scary part about this is that so many really smart people and big analysts and big banks and all that at the end of last year were pretty much on board with. They were arguing: Are they going to cut rates 3 times or 5 times? And that was the debate. Well, here we
Mm-hmm.
are, and there's no cuts anytime soon. and inflation actually is still creeping up. I looked at a stat the other day. The $34 trillion is our national debt. It goes up $1 trillion every 100 days at this point.
Oh
So
my gosh.
not only are we're not balanced, or we're not going in the right direction as far as fiscal management. It seems like, I mean, they just keep printing stuff, but the everyday person, the inflation keeps going up, and things seems like they're going to get more expensive before they get cheaper, by cutting rates and making things cheaper. So who knows? We just got to hold on, keep trying, keep grinding it out. I'm proud of you for picking stuff up. I know it takes a lot of offers and a lot of effort and a lot of comping to try to get out there and pick something up, but you're steady doing it, and I need to get my rear in gear and figure something out for this year. And so we're actually going to talk a little bit about that at the end. We're going to touch on just some of the fundamentals that you want to look at if you're going to invest with somebody, or if you're picking up. Tavis does a great job of tracking a lot of different fundamentals and statistics that he shows his bank. We've talked a little bit about that in our Flipping University, but we're going to just reiterate if the things that you want to really have in line when you're looking at the numbers. So why don't we talk about a little bit of news? So in the news, the towards the end of COVID, a lot of people. I actually had a therapy client that was in the industrial real estate space, and at the time, it was just this, amazing investment, and this is the space that really is underserved. Well, I guess the tide has turned on that, and it has really softened. That market has softened, with one exception, and that's Amazon. And Amazon is evidently by themselves, sort of keeping the industrial and real estate world afloat. And can you believe that they have purchased 15 million square feet of space?
Wow.
That's just, they have a lot of those big warehouses down south in Dallas, and you'll drive by them every once in a while. And I mean, it seems like it takes up a half mile just to drive by these huge distribution centers. And I'm sure there's a lot of feeder businesses that have to be nearby to help supply their
Well,
warehouse. So thank you,
it is
Amazon,
cool.
for keeping us afloat.
Yeah, I mean, and we're pretty spoiled, right? Because there's so much here, um, that Amazon has, right? As far as warehouse space and inventory here locally, there were so many things now you get online to order, and it's like same day
Oh
or
yeah.
tomorrow morning,
5 hours.
and
Yeah, that's crazy.
and I use Amazon a lot these days for lighting, plumbing, different building materials. And back in the day, Amazon existed, but it wasn't really on board for that kind of product.
Right.
And so I was having to go through, local distributors and things like that. And the lead time started killing me. I mean, to get like a valve or
Yeah.
a shower valve or different trim, it might be 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. Lighting, same kind of thing. I would see something I really liked at a local vendor, and I'm like, yeah, I want that. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we got to get it from the warehouse. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then they would put the order in. It'd be somewhere in North Carolina. And by the time they ship it, to the distribution warehouse here locally, and then they could distribute it to me, it was like, you got to be kidding me,
Oh wow. Yeah.
And so,
And then the
and
return, if for some reason it's wrong, you got to
yeah,
take it back to the warehouse. They got so Amazon, take it to Kohl's, whatever, take it. It
yeah,
just
no,
made it so much easier.
UPS, yeah, any UPS store, you can just bring it back, and half the time you can bring it back like unboxed or open box with a
Yeah.
print label, and get rid and send it back. It's very simple.
Yep.
So that's been huge. I mean, and it's kind of spoiled me because we're used to kind of have to plan way ahead in order to make up for these lead times. Now I can kind of do it more on the fly
Mm-hmm.
when I need stuff because Amazon's telling me when it's going to arrive at my door. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, it's definitely a convenience. I mean, I could see why they're thriving like they are and why they are getting more warehouse spaces because they've got to be able to hold this inventory, so that they can distribute it, right? Otherwise, it goes back to what I said before. If you're having to get it from some warehouse in a different state and then get it to a distribution center, all that stuff takes time and leaves error and a lot of room for mistakes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the
Yeah.
ironic thing is they're probably putting a lot of people out of business, and I'm sure some of that business does shift to them. And they do have a third party, where you could be the supplier to Amazon, and they kind of white label stuff, and so there's all the Amazon e-business type stuff you can do
Yeah.
to help your business. But I'm sure they are putting a lot of people out of business. But on the other hand, they're making it cheap and easy for people on the buy side, and they're saving money. So I don't know all the moral math that goes into it, but it does make life a lot more convenient. And sometimes too convenient because you just sit there and you buy stuff and you got 3 more boxes when you get home, and it's like, what just happened? So we talked about Railway Park up in Frisco that is going in. There was another article that kind of specified some more details there. It's going to be millions of square feet of space. There's a fancy gym called Recess. I mean, it looked, just by the looks of it, I don't know if it's like an Equinox type gym that's $500 a month that we have over there at Willow Bend. There's a few of them in town. So it looks like a super fancy gym that's going in there. And then there's going to be 2 4-star hotels that are going in there. So definitely excited about seeing the details there in Frisco. And then let's see, what did I sent you another? Oh, yes. The most important article I sent you. We need to find out what we're going to do with the space left behind by our friends at Red Lobster, because there are going to be seafood themed buildings all over town that are vacant, that are just ripe for redevelopment. So what we need to do is come up with some genius way to use Red Lobsters, a seafood themed putt-putt place or something. And because Red Lobster is closing 80 locations, and I think several of them in Dallas, the closest Red Lobster I know about. I think the only time I've been to Red Lobster in the last 20 years was randomly. We had a family dinner probably 2 years ago up in Frisco, and there was a Red Lobster there. We're like, let's go there. And it was kind of a creepy experience because there was not that many people there, and you got these really sad lobsters floating around in a fish tank out front that seems pretty morbid at this point. It's like,
It's
I don't
definitely
know.
it definitely lost its luster, right? Like, I mean, back in the day, when I was growing up, I mean, my grandfather, it was one of his special places to go, and I
Yeah.
can remember, maybe, he died when I was like 10, but I remember like maybe going once or twice with him, and that was like, an extreme like special treat, right?
Oh
That
yeah.
was like going to Eddie V's back then, right?
Yeah.
And I remember just being fascinated with it. I remember even like being a young kid and bringing home the claw,
Mm.
of the
Yeah.
disposed. You've already eaten the meat, but you had the leftover, claw. And of course, it's Texas, right? We didn't have any experience with
This is
shellfish or
exotic. This is just
yeah,
an exotic
exactly.
world. Yeah.
And then, as I got older, I remember even when Tabitha and I were first dating, like that was a date spot, right? Like,
Yeah.
you go to Red Lobster, man, and it's big spending night. I remember getting to a point financially, I think with Tabitha, where like we didn't look at the prices anymore.
Just
It was
big
like,
time.
what do we want to eat?
Honey, order
Let's just
whatever you
pick
want.
it. Yeah, just whatever. Don't look at the prices. Just order what you want.
Yeah.
I remember getting to that point, and that
Yeah.
was like a huge success. But then over the years, it's like it just lost its luster. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't remember. We used to go more frequent, um, just Tabitha really likes crab, and things like that. And I mean, when you're on a health kick, I'm like, yeah, I'll go and eat fish and and
Yeah.
broccoli and whatever. But then it just kind of lost its.
Yeah.
It just
What I
became this
think,
kind of
we get spoiled and you get some money, you
semi
start to
fast
travel.
food.
Yeah, you travel, you see actual seafood restaurants. You go to Eddie V's once, you're like, what the heck? This exists? And then y'all travel all over the world and go to the Caribbean. Then it gets 5 years between you and a Red Lobster or an Applebee's or something like that, and you go back and you're like, what the? How in the world did this ever even get to where it is now? Because the food quality just seems a little bit odd, and it's very processed and bag oriented or something. I don't know. That our takeaway was just, it was a lot. It was actually a fun night because we just laughed a lot just about
Hmm.
the whole scene. And other sad news, and then we'll get on to our topic because I know you've got a closing to get to. Our friends over at Luby's have closed their location in Plano. It has been a stalwart of real estate there in Plano. We drive by it all the time. I never went to that Luby's. I did go to a Luby's a lot growing up, and had the very distinct smell and a certain vibe with the carpet under the tables, and your little dish of
It
Jello. And
sure does, right? Like, and
man,
that,
it's got I don't know. It's just the whole. I don't know if it's just the steamed that where they keep all the steamed food, or that's the trays that smell, or the carpet, but it had its own feel. But also just has really cool memories for me. Luby's and all that, the furs and the whole
yeah,
cafeteria style thing. Just
cafeteria food.
yeah, man, you just thought you were big time. You got to pick all this stuff, and I'm gonna splurge and get an extra Jello today,
Yeah,
or an extra biscuit.
I was never much of a fan.
No, well, you and a lot of other people, because they're going out of business and they're putting in a Chick-fil-A. So thank goodness Chick-fil-A is doing well. They're
I
selling
think
enough
it's
chicken
inflation, man.
biscuits.
It comes back. I mean, the majority of people who go there are retired,
Yeah.
and or
Hey,
and
the Luann platter, they got to raise the prices.
yeah,
I don't care if you're on a fixed income. We got to pay for these green beans somehow. So they got to raise the prices, and their crowd literally died away, and
well,
it
and
was just not
I'm sure
not.
rent rent increases and
Oh yeah.
you know all of
Well,
that
it's right
stuff
next to
is
one of the nicest golf courses in our town. It's like this
yes.
doesn't really add up. So let's
So
put a
there's now
Chick-fil-A
going to
there.
be a large Chick-fil-A with
Thank goodness.
multiple drive-throughs and all of the fancy stuff that they are
Yeah,
doing
last
these
time I went to
days.
Chick-fil-A, I had to wait 3.5 minutes, and I think we can get it under 3 if we get that thing zipping right. So let's
Right.
let's get into our brief topic. Nothing super huge today, but we did want to talk about this. So Tavis, I want you to talk about some of the metrics that you use when you're tracking a project. Now you've taken on your first investor, and I know you've been working with him, and you show him your numbers. You've showed me your numbers. You have to tell your bank your numbers. So we've talked a lot about, if you want to get involved in real estate, there's tons of ways to do it. You can buy something and flip it yourself. You can invest in a REIT on the stock market. You can buy notes. You can invest with someone else. But if you're going to invest either yourself or with someone else in an actual house, in an actual project, you need to be extra careful about the numbers you're looking at. And so could you go ahead and just go through some of the details, and some of, like, if someone's coming to you, or you're going to someone and saying, hey, I've got a project. I need some money. You've said you wanted to invest, but I got this one coming up. What are the things you're telling them, and what are the things that an investor should be asking you to make sure everyone's on the same page and the agreement is right, and everyone's going to be happy when it turns out?
Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces. I'll kind of give it somewhat of what, like my first interview with, with the bank that I use, was a sit down conversation and kind of talking about my history, my resume, my experience. And one of the things that I started doing years ago was tracking all my projects. So I have a spreadsheet that's done on Excel that we update pretty regularly, quarterly, I would say. And it's a project tracking sheet that breaks down, um, when we bought the project or when we are under contract on the project, and it basically just the pro forma of that project. So the acquisition price, the renovation price, the sell price, the closing cost evaluated with that property, total project time from the acquisition to the sale of that property, and then days on market. We track all of that, and I believe you've seen a copy of that as
Yeah,
well.
it's
So
very
that's
detailed.
something we've grown and developed and added different columns and different information over the years, and I keep up with that on a quarterly basis. I also started putting wholesale properties into that years ago as well, and in showing those margins and those percentages and kind of breaking it down.
Well, and don't you put down your proposed budget and actual budget, how much you were over or under on your rehab too, right?
Yeah. So then and then switching gears. So that's kind of the project tracking, my resume, if you will. And then in addition to that would be each project has its own spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet has developed and grown over the years. And it's very specific to what I do and how I categorize and how I pay subs. So in some cases, people may split out labor and materials. And so when they do their budgets, they do a whole labor column per unit or per bathroom or per bedroom, however they want to do it. And then they figure out materials that are separate. In my case, a lot of it's turnkey. So I'm doing it more kind of based on, um, like I have a granite column or a countertop section. I have a tile section. I have a plumbing section. I have an electrical section. I'd break it all down almost by a subcontractor in a way. I have glass section, right, which is also exterior windows, but also includes interior glass, and I have that all broken out. In the electrical column, I have, labor, and then I also have like electrical materials separated out, or hardware, light fixtures, and things like that. That is separate from like a turnkey electrician that's going to charge me for boxes and electrical outlets and things like that, right? That's part of their cost versus my cost. And plumbing, similar situation, turnkey plumbing, like what we're doing starting tomorrow on this property, changing out cast iron lines. That's kind of major plumbing. And then I have a column for, materials like a bathtub or, shower pans, things like that, valves and trim that I'm going to buy separate. So, anyways, I break that all down, but then I have a very detailed budget. I provide that to my bank in the beginning when we're putting together my numbers. So not only is it a dollar per foot calculation when I'm walking it and justifying my numbers, but then I actually sit down and I do my budget specific to that property, and I kind of work it, work all the numbers to kind of be within that range of whatever that proposal is, and really analyze it and break it down to come up with that total number. And then I give that to the bank and say, here's my rehab budget. Here's what we're doing. And so then the appraisal projection is done with that appraisal or with that rehab spreadsheet in mind. Like you mentioned, I have an investor that's wanting to learn, that's kind of thrown, some funds into the deals now. And so I'm keeping him alert as well, and showing him this information as well, so he can learn and kind of see and see where the money's being used and how. And then I basically do that weekly. So I pay my guys on Fridays. So if they invoice me by Thursdays, it's a very strict regimen. And every once in a while, somebody may need a draw or something, outside of that realm. But for the most part, all of my guys are trained that I pay on Fridays. You invoice me Thursday, you'll get a check Friday.
Well, and if you're investor, and the other thing too, and I know we got to go, you got a closing, but you have your agreement with your investor too, and so it's like, hey, our agreement on this one is you're going to put in 50 grand, and I'm going to pay you, our rate is whatever, 10% annual or 12% annual or 10% flat on this one. And you're going to wire it here, and it's all kind of laid out. And there's times in the
we
world,
have a contract, right?
You have a contract, promissory note. Yeah, it's all laid out, and you can do it however you want. But I would recommend, the times I've done it as well, use the promissory note. And a lot of times with wholesale stuff, you do need to work quicker. And there are times when there's things that you have to jump on. But a lot of times, once you've kind of established with an investor, and you can move faster because you're like, hey, I know they've told me they have, let's say, 50 grand to work with, and these are you can kind of work out the terms ahead of time and say, okay, I'm going to be looking for a project that fits this mold here, and when I find it, are you ready to go? And so then you can kind of move faster once you get established. But just be cautious out there. There's a lot of people right now that are doing projects that. I saw one yesterday, a buddy sent me that I sent Tavis that looks like someone just started to flip it. It's down in Dallas. They've painted the outside. They've done some work. They've done some sheetrock work. Now they've put it back up for sale on our investor, Trelly, and there's water all over the concrete. I mean, you can see there's standing water in the house, Yeah. But someone had started to flip this. And so this guy's in trouble. And I don't blame him. I mean, things like this happen for all sorts of reasons, and people have to dump houses and they have to work.
Yeah. Well, you considered it last year in the middle of Maple.
Yeah. I considered it, so there's times when you've got to kind of rush and sell stuff and make, sort of hasty decisions. But in general, before you jump in and you're trying to go into on an investment, just try to do your fundamentals. There's a lot of people right now that are scrambling. Like we said, things are expensive. Things are not moving super fast. There's more and more inventory building up. The competition on the sell side is steeper. So if they've gotten themselves in trouble, they may be trying to scramble and try to figure things out. So
Well,
just be
and I think
careful.
you owe it. You owe it to your investor if you bring in somebody in, that wants to learn. In my case, I'm the expert, right? I have the experience. I know the ins and outs. And this person is trusting me, um, to learn from me, but they're trusting what I say, and I
Yeah.
have to follow that up, and I have to make sure that I have all of my T's crossed, and my I's are dotted, right, to build
Yeah.
that trust. And it's a risk, for them, and it's a risk for me. And if this is going to be a good relationship, and if it's going to be somebody that's on my back, or that is annoying me, or whatever the case may be,
Right.
when I may or may not really need this investor, but it's an
Yeah.
opportunity where I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
see some value here. And so essentially it comes down to just clear and convenience of communication
Yep.
and setting the expectations. And one of the things that I like to do a lot, and I do this even with my bank, is I kind of tee up the situation. Hey, I'm looking at a property. I think I might have this one. Here's the scenario. I don't have it inked yet. I don't have the contract, but here's what I'm looking at. And, here's the projections. And just letting you know, like, I have one in the pipeline, right? Or I have one that might execute. And it may not end up being anything, but if it does, then it's like, hey, you remember that thing I talked to you about a couple days ago? Okay, we're inking the contract today. This is the next time frame. I'm going to need, funds from you within a week or whatever. And I had a conversation with this individual, last week or a couple weeks ago, saying, hey, man, you've got some extra cash, that we're looking at taking down another one. If you don't have that cash available now, you may think about it if you want to continue. But and he was like, hey, I got to move some stuff around.
Yeah.
He's like, how long do I have? And I'm like, well, you probably need to work on getting it over, because I mean, anything can happen. I'm bidding on these properties each week.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all right, cool, give me a week. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's just having those conversations and setting the expectations, um, clearly. And then, again, having your resume, having your ducks in a row. Like I said, I've learned this a long time ago, but I'm only usually a week out from knowing exactly where my money is on each project, right?
Mm.
Um, and that's, I go back to those Fridays. I also use that time when I'm doing payroll to update my spreadsheet. What have I got in this deal? What are my draws so far? What's left in the budget? Am I
Mm-hmm.
on track? Am I tracking the right way or not? Am I going to be over budget, under budget? What am I looking like?
Yep.
So,
Well, that is definitely part of your experience that I want to learn from the next time I get into a project, because those are the things that I started to grab onto towards the end of the last one. I've never started a project with those numbers in mind, with that strategy, with the paying on Fridays. I really want to go from a project from point A to A to Z with this system and have everything lined up, because it seems like it would actually take some stress off, and you're not questioning, what do I have left? What have I spent? All that sort of
well,
thing.
especially running multiple jobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's an
you gotta
absolute
keep it.
thing. And you
Yeah.
were dealing with two last year at the same time,
Yeah.
and it was overwhelming,
It
right?
was overwhelming. Yes. And I'm still figuring that out, but learning, and I'm looking to get into something hopefully by the end of the year. We're still looking around. I'm doing a lot on my end to try to just get things shored up personally, trying to make sure I've got my ducks in a row from a personal finance standpoint before I really get going on anything that's too out there and too risky and that sort of thing. So working hard on that. If you have not, please like, subscribe, share this with someone else. We have not even mentioned it, but we hit 50 episodes. Congratulations,
Woohoo!
Tavis. We did 50. This is
Hey,
number 52. So very
that's
proud of
exciting.
that. We're almost at 2,000 downloads. So if a few people shared this one, a few extra people, if we bumped this one just a little bit, I mean a little bit above our average, not a lot, but a little
Yeah.
bit above our average, we could get to 2,000 downloads maybe before the next one comes out, number
Hey,
53.
and some of you guys that do listen, it's great when I see you physically to say,
Yeah.
that you've been tuning in and listening in and like it. And that's awesome. But drop us a line, text us, email us, reach out to us on social media if you guys do listen and you like to
Yeah.
hear certain things, or you want us to talk about other specific topics, or
Yeah.
some things you like or don't like. We're happy to hear that feedback. It's going to help us improve and get better and come up with more content each and every week. So please don't hesitate. You're not going to hurt our feelings. Just reach out. I mean, this is something new for Ash and I both. We enjoy doing it. Basically we just have our weekly real estate conversations each week, and you guys get to tune in. I mean,
Yep.
really is how we try to do this style. So,
Yep.
if you guys have different people that you'd like to see us bring into the show, or different
Topics.
topics,
Yep.
we have some speakers lined up that are going to be really cool to bring in, that are something that is a new territory for us, and things like that to learn from. And so we're excited to bring that stuff to you guys as well.
Yeah. I always love getting feedback. Find us on YouTube, make some comments on there. That's probably one of the easier places to actually put a comment and have us seen. And some of our YouTube videos have gotten some views, and I actually put an old video that I had done just several months ago with my buddy Josh Miller, our technological guy. Before we were kind of doing video and all this for the podcast, we went out to Grandscape and went to the truck yard. So I did a cool video out there. I've gained some weight. Looking back at that video I shot a handful of months ago, I was like, good night. But yeah, that's a cool video. So go check out the video about the truck yard on our YouTube channel. We'll link it in our description. But until next time, we hope you have a great day.